What if the biggest reason your dreams never come true is because you keep talking about them? Think about that for a moment. How many times have you felt a surge of excitement about a new goal, a new business idea, a new version of yourself, and before you even took the first real step, you told someone, maybe it was a friend over coffee, maybe it was family at dinner, maybe you posted it online hoping for encouragement. And in that moment, it felt good, really good. People nodded, some were impressed, some praised your ambition, some even said, wow, you're gonna crush it. But then something strange happened. The fire you once felt started fading. The urgency disappeared. The late nights you promised yourself never came. The discipline slipped. And slowly, quietly, the dream stayed exactly where it started, inside your head. Here's a truth most people learn too late. The moment you announce your plans, your brain tricks you into feeling like you've already achieved something. Psychologists call it social reality. When others acknowledge your intention, your mind receives a premature sense of completion. You get the emotional reward without doing the hard work. And once the reward is felt, the hunger weakens. Real builders understand this. Real leaders move differently. They don't rush to broadcast their intentions. They protect them. They treat their goals like seeds planted deep beneath the soil, invisible, fragile, and sacred, because a seed exposed too early never becomes a tree. Ask yourself this. Have you ever noticed how the loudest person in the room is rarely the one winning? The person constantly declaring, big things are coming, often stays exactly where they are. Meanwhile, someone you barely noticed is quietly putting in the hours, learning the skills, failing, adjusting, growing, and one day their success seems to appear out of nowhere. It was never out of nowhere. It was simply out of sight. Silence is not weakness. Silence is strategy. When you stop telling everyone what you're about to do, something powerful happens. Your focus sharpens. Your energy stops leaking into conversations that don't move you forward. You no longer perform for approval, you execute for results. Because the truth is, not everyone clapping for you wants to see you win. Some people doubt you. Some feel threatened by your growth. Others will unintentionally project their fears onto you. And the more people you tell, the heavier their opinions become. So instead of talking, start building. Let your progress make the noise. Let your discipline speak so loudly that explanations become unnecessary. Move in silence, not because you have something to hide, but because you have something to protect. Have you ever noticed that the moment you share a goal, it suddenly feels lighter, almost as if part of the work has already been done? You walk away from the conversation energized, imagining the future, picturing the applause. But energy created by words is dangerously different from energy created by action. One fades quickly, the other compounds. Most people don't fail because they lack talent. They don't fail because they aren't smart enough. They fail because they confuse intention with execution. Talking becomes a substitute for doing. Imagine a runner standing at the starting line of a marathon. Instead of running, he turns to the crowd and begins describing how he will finish, how strong he feels, how prepared he is. The crowd cheers. Cameras flash. For a moment, he feels like a champion. But while he talks, the race has already begun and everyone else is moving forward. Life works the same way. When you announce your plans, you step into a performance. You start managing people's expectations instead of managing your behavior. Suddenly, your goal is no longer just about growth. It becomes tied to your identity. Now, you don't want to look foolish. You don't want to fail publicly. So what do most people do? They retreat to safer goals, smaller ambitions, comfortable routines. Silence removes that pressure. When nobody knows what you're building, you are free to be terrible at the beginning. You are free to struggle without embarrassment. You are free to fail, adjust, and try again without an audience keeping score. And let me tell you something that might challenge the way you think. Early failure is not the enemy of success. Exposure is. Failure in private teaches you. Exposure before you are ready discourages you. There is a reason elite performers operate behind closed doors. The athlete trains when no one is watching. The writer drafts pages no one will ever read. The entrepreneur experiments quietly before launching publicly. Mastery is always built in the unseen hours. Ask yourself, are you more committed to being seen as someone who will succeed, or to doing what is required to actually succeed? Because those are two very different paths. One is fueled by attention. The other is fueled by discipline. Attention feels exciting, but it is unstable. Discipline is often boring, repetitive, and invisible, yet it is the only thing strong enough to carry you through doubt. You don't need everyone to believe in your vision. You need enough belief to keep showing up when motivation disappears. Protect that belief. Guard it carefully, especially in the early stages when it is still fragile. Remember this, a candle in a storm must be shielded until it becomes a fire. So stop seeking validation for a future you haven't built yet. Instead, build a future so undeniable that validation becomes irrelevant. Let me tell you a story that perfectly captures why silence is power. Early in his career, there was a young architect who dreamed of designing buildings that would redefine entire city skylines. He was ambitious, disciplined, and deeply committed to mastery. But unlike many of his peers, he almost never spoke about his long-term vision. When people asked about his future, he kept his answers simple. I'm learning, I'm improving, I'm working. Meanwhile, others around him constantly talked about the firms they would start, the awards they would win, the influence they would have. Their conversations were filled with big declarations. And for a while, it seemed like they were ahead, more connected, more visible, more recognized. But something different was happening behind the scenes. While they talked, he studied. While they networked endlessly, he practiced. While they chased attention, he chased improvement. Night after night, he reviewed his mistakes. Project after project, he refined his thinking. He understood something most people miss: greatness is rarely a breakthrough. It is usually a buildup. Years later, when a major development project opened in the heart of a growing city, the selection committee wasn't looking for the loudest voice. They were looking for the steadiest hand, the person whose work spoke clearly without needing explanation. They chose him. Almost overnight, people began calling him an overnight success. But you already know the truth. There is no such thing. What looks sudden from the outside is almost always the result of quiet consistency. Here's the lesson: when you stop announcing your ambitions, you reclaim time. And time is the most valuable resource you have. Every minute spent explaining what you plan to do is a minute not spent actually doing it. But there's another layer to this that most people never consider. When you speak your plans too early, you lock yourself into a version of the future that you might outgrow. Growth requires flexibility. It requires the freedom to pivot, to change direction as you learn. Silence gives you that freedom. Think of your goal like wet cement. Before it hardens, it needs space to be shaped. Too many outside opinions press fingerprints into it before it's ready. And understand this clearly: people don't always doubt you out of malice. Often, they project their own limitations without realizing it. Someone who abandoned their dream will instinctively question yours. Someone afraid of risk will advise caution. Someone who chose comfort will struggle to understand your hunger. If you listen too closely, their ceiling becomes your ceiling. So be careful whose voices you allow near your vision. You don't need a chorus of approval. You need clarity. You need patience. You need the quiet confidence to keep moving even when nobody is watching. Because in the end, the strongest statement you will ever make is not what you say you're going to do. It's what you silently prove you've done. There is a dangerous moment that appears on every meaningful journey, and most people don't even realize when it happens. It's the moment you start believing that talking about the work is the same as doing the work. Your brain loves efficiency. It is constantly searching for the fastest way to feel rewarded. When you describe your future success, your brain releases dopamine, the same chemical associated with achievement. For a brief instant, your mind celebrates. It relaxes. It says, "Good job, we're on the way." But you're not. You're still standing at the starting line. This is why so many people stay trapped in cycles of excitement followed by inaction. They mistake emotional highs for progress. They fall in love with the idea of transformation instead of committing to the process that makes transformation real. Let me ask you something honestly. How many people do you know who are always about to do something big? They're about to start the business, about to get in shape, about to change their life, yet months pass, sometimes years. And nothing changes except the story they keep telling. Don't become addicted to the announcement. Become addicted to the execution. Because execution is where identity is forged. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, even a small one, you strengthen the internal voice that says, "I am someone who follows through." And that voice matters far more than applause. Understand this. Confidence is not built by telling the world who you want to be. Confidence is built by proving to yourself who you are, quietly, repeatedly, relentlessly. The world often celebrates bold declarations, but history respects consistent action. Think about the people you admire most, the ones who truly changed industries, communities, or ideas. Many of them disappeared for seasons at a time, while others speculated about what they were doing. They were deep in the work, refining, failing, learning, adapting. They weren't chasing visibility, they were chasing excellence. And excellence takes concentration. It demands long stretches of uninterrupted effort. Every conversation about your plan pulls you out of that state. It scatters your focus. Guard your focus like your future depends on it, because it does. There is another hidden cost to oversharing. You begin to feel accountable to people who have no real investment in your growth. Their curiosity becomes pressure. Their timelines become distractions. Their opinions become noise. But when you move in silence, your accountability shifts inward. The standard is no longer what others expect. It is what you require from yourself. That is where real power lies. So instead of asking, "Who should I tell?" asking, "What must I do today that my future self will thank me for?" Then do it. No announcement, no performance, no hesitation, just progress. Most people underestimate how fragile a dream is in its early stages. They think once they feel inspired, that inspiration is permanent. But inspiration is more like a spark than a fire. It must be protected, fed, and given the right environment to grow. Expose it too soon, and the wind of other people's opinions can extinguish it before it ever has a chance to burn. Picture a sculptor standing before a massive block of marble. At the beginning, no one else can see the masterpiece hidden inside. To everyone else, it's just stone. If the sculptor invited a crowd to critique every strike of the chisel, the noise would become unbearable. Why are you cutting there? That doesn't look right. Are you sure you know what you're doing? But the sculptor understands something important. Clarity often looks like confusion to those who cannot see the vision. Your dream works the same way. Not everyone is meant to understand what you're building, especially before it takes shape. And that's not a sign you should explain it better. It's a sign you should work on it more. There is a quiet phase required for all meaningful growth. Seeds do not break through the soil the day they are planted. Roots must form first, deep, strong, and invisible. Without roots, Even the most promising tree collapses at the first sign of a storm. Ask yourself, are you focused on growing roots? Or are you impatiently trying to show the world leaves that don't exist yet? Because impatience is often what drives people to overshare. They crave reassurance that they're on the right path. They want immediate acknowledgement. But the path to mastery has long stretches where no one claps for you. No one notices the early mornings, the late nights, the sacrifices. You must learn to draw strength from progress itself, not from recognition. And here is where discipline separates dreamers from builders. Motivation is emotional, it rises and falls. Discipline is structural and holds steady regardless of how you feel. When you stop broadcasting your intentions, you stop relying on motivation fueled by external reactions. Instead, you create routines that carry you forward even on days when the excitement is gone. That is how momentum is built. Another truth few people talk about: when you share a goal, people remember the version you described, but growth will change you. As you learn, your standards rise, your direction sharpens. Sometimes the goal evolves into something bigger than you originally imagined. Silence gives you permission to evolve without having to explain why. You are allowed to outgrow your old plans. You are allowed to change strategies. You are allowed to become someone your past self wouldn't even recognize. But constant explanation traps you in outdated identities. So protect the early version of your dream. Work on it until it becomes strong enough to stand on its own, until it no longer needs protection because its results speak with undeniable authority. Let people be surprised. There is a unique power in being underestimated. Let me challenge a belief that quietly holds many people back, the belief that support must come before action. We are taught to seek encouragement, to gather approval, to make sure others believe in us before we fully commit. It sounds reasonable, it sounds safe, but safety has never been the birthplace of greatness. If you wait for everyone to understand your vision, you will be waiting for the rest of your life. Because vision is by nature lonely at the beginning. Think about every meaningful change you've ever made. There was a moment, maybe brief, maybe uncomfortable, when you realized that nobody could walk the path for you. Advice could guide you, but it could not replace your steps. Applause could motivate you, but it could not endure the struggle for you. At some point, ownership becomes non-negotiable. And ownership thrives in silence. When you stop explaining your plans, you stop negotiating your ambition. You no longer adjust your dreams to fit inside other people's comfort zones. You stop shrinking your goals to avoid intimidating those around you. Instead, you expand. Understand this clearly: some people will only support the version of you that stays familiar to them. Growth disrupts relationships. Not always dramatically, not always intentionally, but it does. When you begin to elevate your standards, your habits change, your priorities shift. The things you once tolerated become unacceptable, and people notice. Some will celebrate your evolution. Others will subtly resist it. They might joke about your discipline, question your intensity, suggest that you're doing too much. What they often mean is simple: your change highlights their decision to remain the same. This is why moving quietly is not about secrecy, it is about emotional independence. You are learning to generate belief internally instead of borrowing it externally. There is incredible stability in that. When belief comes from within, it cannot be withdrawn by someone else's doubt. It doesn't fluctuate with opinions. It doesn't collapse under criticism. But internal belief is built through evidence, and evidence comes from action. Every promise you keep to yourself becomes proof. Every day you show up, especially when it would be easier not to, you cast another vote for the person you are becoming. Over time, those votes form an identity that is unshakable. Here is something powerful to remember: you don't need everyone to see your potential. You need to behave in a way that makes your potential inevitable. So work when it's quiet. Improve when nobody is measuring you. Stretch your capabilities without announcing that you're stretching. One day, the results will introduce you far better than words ever could. And when that day comes, people will say, "When did this happen?" They won't realize it was happening all along. In the mornings, you chose discipline over sleep. In the evenings, you chose growth over comfort. In the countless moments, you chose effort over excuse. Keep choosing that, even when no one is watching. There is a phase on every path to greatness that feels incredibly unfair. You are working harder than ever, yet it seems like nothing is happening. No recognition, no visible breakthrough, no sudden shift that confirms you are on the right track. Just effort repeated again and again. This is the phase where most people quit, not because they lack ability, but because they lack patience. We live in a world obsessed with visible progress. We celebrate highlights, not the hundreds of unseen hours that created them. And when people don't see immediate results, they panic. They start talking more about their plans, almost as if saying them out loud will accelerate their arrival. But progress does not respond to noise. Progress responds to consistency. Imagine an iceberg. From a distance, all you see is a massive structure rising above the water. What you don't see is the far greater mass hidden beneath the surface. Your effort must become that hidden mass, solid, expanding, quietly supporting the future everyone will eventually notice. The danger of telling everyone your plans is that it makes you crave visible movement too soon. You feel pressure to produce proof before the foundation is ready. And rush foundations always crack. Instead, fall in love with the invisible stretch. Fall in love with the days that feel ordinary, but are secretly shaping you into someone extraordinary. Because transformation is rarely dramatic while it's happening. It is subtle, gradual, almost unnoticeable. You don't suddenly wake up disciplined. Discipline is built each time you do what you said you would do. You don't suddenly become confident. Confidence accumulates each time you survive something you once thought you couldn't handle. Let me tell you something reassuring. Feeling like nothing is happening is often a sign that everything is happening. Skills are wiring themselves into your nervous system. Your tolerance for discomfort is expanding. Your standards are rising. You are becoming more resilient than the version of you that started. But none of that needs an audience. In fact, the absence of an audience is often what makes deep growth possible. Without constant feedback, you learn to evaluate yourself. You develop self-trust. You stop asking, am I doing enough? And start declaring, I will do more. Here is where quiet perseverance becomes your greatest advantage. While others are distracted by comparison, you remain anchored in commitment. While they chase quick wins, you build lasting strength. And one day, not overnight, but inevitably, the scale tips, the effort compounds, the skills align with opportunity. What once felt heavy becomes natural. People will look at you and assume you were always capable. They will see the result and underestimate the endurance it required. Let them. You are not doing this for their understanding. You are doing this to become someone your past self would barely recognize, someone stronger, steadier, and far more dangerous to mediocrity. So when it feels slow, remember slow is not the opposite of success. Slow is often the path to mastery. At some point, if you stay committed long enough, a quiet shift begins to happen inside you. It's not loud, it's not dramatic. Most people around you won't even notice it at first, but you will feel it, a growing sense of certainty, not arrogance, not ego. Certainty, it shows up in the way you make decisions. You hesitate less, you second-guess yourself less, you stop looking around to see what everyone else is doing, because you are finally anchored in your own direction. This is one of the hidden rewards of moving in silence. You develop self-trust, and once self-trust is built, everything changes. Understand this. The loudest voice in most people's lives is doubt. What if I'm not ready? What if I fail? What will people think? These questions paralyze more dreams than lack of talent ever could. But every time you act without announcing, without seeking permission, you weaken doubt's grip. You prove to yourself that you don't need perfect conditions to begin. You just need the courage to continue. There is something else that happens when you stop telling everyone your plans. You become harder to distract. Opinions lose their power over you because you are no longer collecting them. Comparison fades because your focus is internal. You are no longer running someone else's race. You are building your own. Let me be clear about something. Silence is not isolation. You don't have to cut yourself off from the world. What you must cut off is unnecessary noise. There is a difference between wise counsel and casual opinion. Wise counsel usually comes from those who have walked a path similar to the one you're on. Their words are grounded in experience. Casual opinions, on the other hand, often come from spectators, people observing the game from comfortable seats, untouched by the risk you are taking. Learn to recognize the difference, because the more selective you become about whose voice you allow into your life, the clearer your own voice becomes. And clarity is a force multiplier. When you are clear, your energy stops scattering. Your effort stops leaking into directions that don't matter. You wake up knowing what deserves your attention and what does not. That kind of focus is rare. Most people are pulled by urgency instead of guided by purpose. They react instead of design. But you are learning to operate differently. You are learning to choose deliberately. Here is a powerful realization: you don't have to announce your growth for it to be real. Growth does not require witnesses. Mountains rise in silence. Seasons change without permission. Strength forms the same way, gradually, naturally, without fanfare. Then one day, someone who hasn't seen you in a while will pause and say, "You've changed." And they'll be right. What they won't see are the countless disciplined choices that created that change. The moments you kept going when it would have been easier to stop. The times you stayed quiet while your identity was being rebuilt from the inside out. Keep rebuilding. You are closer than you think. There comes a moment in every serious journey when talking less is no longer just a strategy. It becomes part of who you are. You stop fighting for attention. You stop feeling the urge to explain yourself. You become comfortable letting your actions carry the message. And that is when maturity begins to reveal itself. Because maturity is not about age. It is about emotional control. It is about learning that not every thought deserves to be spoken, not every plan deserves an audience, and not every victory needs to be announced. Ask yourself this honestly: why do you feel the need to tell people what you're about to do? Is it encouragement you're seeking or validation? Is it support or recognition? There is no judgment in the question, only awareness. Once you understand the motive, you regain control. Many people overshare because silence feels uncomfortable. When nobody knows your plan, you stand alone with your commitment. There is no safety net of public expectation. If you quit, no one will call you out. If you fail, there is no external excuse. It becomes personal. And personal responsibility is heavy, but is also incredibly empowering. Because when the responsibility is yours, so is the transformation. Let me introduce you to a mindset that separates high performers from everyone else. They focus more on standards than on feelings. Feelings fluctuate. Some mornings you wake up energized, others you wake up doubtful. If you rely on emotion, your progress will always be unstable. Standards, however, create structure. You don't go to the gym because you feel like it. You go because it's who you are. You don't practice your craft only when inspiration strikes. You practice because excellence has become your baseline. When your standards rise, your tolerance for distraction drops automatically. Suddenly, gossip feels expensive. Endless scrolling feels like theft. Conversations that once entertained you now feel like obstacles. This is not arrogance. This is alignment. You are aligning your daily behavior with the future you refuse to compromise. But here's the part most people misunderstand. Moving in silence does not mean moving slowly. In fact, silence often accelerates progress. Without the energy drain of constant explanation, you recover hours of focus every single week. Hours that can be invested into learning, refining, building. Over a year, that difference becomes massive. While others are broadcasting intentions, you are stacking evidence, skill by skill, habit by habit, decision by decision. Eventually, something remarkable happens. You no longer feel the need to prove anything. Not because you stopped caring, but because your confidence is now rooted in reality. You know the work you've done. You know the discipline you've sustained. And that knowledge creates a calm strength that no opinion can shake. So keep your head down when necessary. Keep your standards high at all times. Let patience become your advantage. Remember, noise attracts attention, but consistency earns respect. Now imagine this moment. Years from today, you wake up in a life that once existed only in your imagination. The environment is different. The opportunities are greater. The person staring back at you in the mirror carries a presence that cannot be faked, calm, capable, certain. And people will ask you the question they always ask successful individuals: how did you do it? They will expect a secret, a shortcut, a breakthrough moment that changed everything overnight. But you will know the truth. It wasn't one moment. It was 1,000 quiet decisions. It was the mornings you chose discipline over comfort, the nights you kept working while the world slept, the weekends you invested in growth instead of temporary escape. It was every time you resisted the urge to announce your plans and instead returned to the work. Because while others were seeking attention, you were building substance. Here is the irony. The louder the world becomes, the more powerful quiet commitment is. Most people are competing for visibility. Very few are competing for mastery. Visibility can make you look important for a moment. Mastery makes you impossible to ignore for a lifetime. So stop asking whether people recognize your effort. Ask whether your effort is recognizable in your skill. Stop worrying about who is applauding. Focus on becoming undeniable. There will be seasons when nobody understands your schedule, when your dedication looks extreme, when people question why you're pushing so hard without immediate reward. Let them question. You are not building for their comfort. You are building for your calling. And understand this clearly. Success rarely announces its arrival. It reveals itself quietly. Then suddenly, one opportunity leads to another. One door opens because your preparation finally meets the right moment. To outsiders, it will look fast. To you, it will feel right on time. Before we close, hold on to this principle for the rest of your life. Speak less about where you are going and spend more time going there. Protect your vision from unnecessary exposure. Protect your energy from unnecessary conversations. Protect your time from unnecessary distractions. Move with purpose, not performance. Let your habits introduce you before your words ever have to. One day, the results will speak so clearly that explanations will feel unnecessary. Your life itself will become the message. A reminder that patience is not passive, silence is not weakness, and discipline never goes unnoticed. So from this moment forward, make a quiet promise to yourself. Dream boldly. Work relentlessly. Stay humble. Stay focused, and move in silence until the world has no choice but to listen.